Lord of Clegane woke at dawn to the chitter of sparrows and the slow-turning squeak of a broken weather vane overhead. The pallet of straw beneath him smelled of old horse and warm iron. The taste of last night's thin ale lingered on his tongue like rust. He lay still, staring at the smoke-blackened rafters of the stable loft, and listened to his own pulse, determined to decide, one final time, whether he would ride east to Bravos and vanish into mercenary anonymity, or turn south and face the smoldering ruin that had once been his family's home. The choice weighed on him like a mailed fist against his throat. Yet the small wind at the eaves carried another sound as well. The laughter of children in the road below, unscarred, unconcerned. It stung him more sharply than the scar tissue that ran from brow to jaw. Outside, the village of Maidenbrook was clawing itself out of winter. Tanners scraped hides in the pale sunshine. A flax-haired woman beat dust from rush mats. Two barefoot boys hooted as they chased a three-legged dog. Sandor ignored them as he saddled Stranger. Years of violence had trained the horse to accept his master's hand without question. Though the stallion's white-grimmed eyes rolled toward the villagers, nostrils quivering. "Easy," Sandor muttered, running a thumb along the brute's scarred muzzle. "We're ghosts to them. Ghosts cannot be harmed." The lie tasted sour, but Stranger whickered as if he believed it. He rode southwest for most of the morning, careful to keep to the lesser trails that wound like veins through the Crownlands. The main roads were thick with sellsword companies sniffing for scraps of conflict, or with Lannister men still shaking down hamlets for the king's taxes. Sandor had sworn never again to bend knee to a lion, and yet, when he closed his eyes, he still saw his brother's sigil blazing scarlet and gold above Clegane Keep's black, basalt walls. Gregor had died in a distant cell, poisoned by his own cruelty. But the shadow of the mountain lived on. Cast across every half-ruined hamlet, Sandor passed. Near midday he reached a low ridge overlooking the Trident's northern fork, its waters fat and quick with spring melt. Beyond the river, fields lay in patchwork squares. Some freshly sown, others a blotched brown where harvests had failed in the war. At the far edge of those fields rose a squat silhouette he had dreamed of and dreaded in equal measure. Clegane Keep, nothing like the soaring stone of Harrenhal or the rose-clad elegance of Highgarden, but a hard, ugly blockhouse crouched on a finger of basalt. The kennels at its base had bred hounds for Targaryen kings once. Now, smoke drifted from their chimneys again, lazy and gray. Someone was home. Sandor drew in a breath thick with river mist and mud. The air tasted unchanged, the place was unchanging. But he was not. For the first time since he'd fled King's Landing, he let the notion settle like a stone in his gut. He might claim the keep, drive out whatever curs had taken up residence, and guard the land that bore his name. Guard it, not with terror, but with the grudging sense of duty he had learned among the fellowship of a quiet sept on an island of peace. Brother Ray was long in his grave, yet the man's words clung to Sandor as stubbornly as burrs to a cloak. There is no forgetting, but there may be mending. He crossed the Trident at a plank bridge half repaired with scavenged nails, tipping a silver stag to the farmer who stood watch with a cudgel. The man's eyes widened at the coin, then followed the scars on Sandor's face. Yet he lifted the chain to let horse and rider pass without a word. That silence was welcome. Too often, words became blades. The track beyond the river was rutted, flanked by thornbush and elder. Here and there, charred timbers jutted from blackened foundations where tenant cottages had once stood. An orchard of twisted craveable saplings listed beneath the weight of unpruned limbs. Sandor remembered stealing fruit there with his sister, before Gregor had burned her doll, before the dogs, before everything. He pressed his knees to Stranger's flanks, urging the animal to a slow, almost respectful pace, as if they rode through a crypt. The first arrow whispered past his ear, at the turn of the lane. A second thudded into the sodden earth before Stranger's forehoofs. Sandor reined in hard and swung down behind the stallion's shoulder, using the horse as a shield as he scanned the trees. No banners, no warhorn, just bandits then, or squatters defending stolen ground. He had expected as much. Still, annoyance flared hot beneath his ribs. This was his land by birthright, scarred as he was scarred. He drew his greatsword with a rasp of steel. "Show yourselves, curs!" His voice boomed across the lane, deeper than the thunder that prowled beyond the western hills. Leaves shivered, but no faces emerged. Only a single figure stepped from behind a lightning-struck oak. A girl barely tall enough to draw the longbow she carried. She wore a patched cloak too big for her, and boots slashed at the toe. Her chin did not tremble as she knocked a fresh shaft. "Go back." Voice thin, but steady. "We don't suffer sellswords here." "I'm no sellsword," Sandor answered. He straightened to his full height, letting the light fall across the melted ruin of his cheek. The girl's arrowhead wavered, though she did not lower it. "Tell your fellows the rightful lord has come." "Lord's dead," she said. "Which lord?" He took a step forward. The greatsword's tip dragged a line in the dirt. "Sir Gregor." Her voice cracked then. Even children feared the mountain's tales. "But it doesn't matter. His men took all that mattered before they marched away. What's left is ours." "Ours." He caught the slip. "Who are you, girl?" "My name's Hallie." She jutted her chin. "Was Hallie Hayford, but the Hayfords are not now. Your brother burned our holding." The old anger flared, but this time it was not mindless. He understood the pattern now. Violence sprouting more violence, as inevitable as weeds. He sheathed his sword in one smooth motion and raised both hands empty. "I aim to mend what he marred," he said. "I have no quarrel with children." He paused. "Nor with the mothers who keep them alive." At that, 3 more figures emerged. A wiry woman with a woodsman's axe, a ragged man missing half an ear, and a boy younger than Hallie balancing a sling. Their faces carried the familiar thinness of near starvation. Their eyes held more suspicion than hope. Bandits, yet not monsters. Only survivors. Sandor spread his gauntleted fingers. "Your arrows would find me slow, but I can be slower yet to anger if you mean to parley." The woman narrowed her gaze. "Parley for what?" "The keep's near empty, and what's inside is ours, by right of blood and toil." "Blood, eh?" He touched his scar. "But not your blood. And toil must be shared, else the field lies fallow. Stand aside, and I will not begrudge you food or safe walls, while we speak of what comes next." "You speak like a septon." The man with the half-ear scoffed. "I speak like a hound who's learned the worth of peace." He dared a step nearer. "The worth is bread, water, and an end to burying kin. Lower your bow, girl." Hallie hesitated, then let the string ease. The shaft sank, but her gaze held his. When she nodded at last, Sandor exhaled as if a mailed weight had been lifted. They led him the final quarter-mile to the keep. A sagging palisade of split logs surrounded the outer yard where briars had swallowed the kennels. Within the yard sprawled half a dozen lean T.O. huts, patched with wagon canvas dye. Children's tattered blankets hung from balconies that once echoed with the baying of warhounds. Sandor saw no more than 15 souls total, the flotsam of war, drifting until they struck the first unguarded shore. Inside the great hall, smoke from a single hearth curled listlessly beneath soot-laminated rafters. A hound's banner still hung above the dais, but its colors were bleached and stained by grease. Sandor stared at it until his throat tightened. Even ruined, its snarling head mocked him with memory. The woman with the axe. She named herself Mara, offered him a chipped clay cup of small beer, more a gesture than a gift. He drank and tasted ash. When he set the cup down, he spoke plainly, voice low so it would not carry beyond the hearth circle. "I fled this keep years ago, driven by a man who mistook cruelty for strength. That man is dead. His crimes remain, embedded in wood and stone like rot under a nail. I do not ask forgiveness for bearing his name, yet I claim the burden of it." He let his scarred hands rest on the table so they could see the tremor that still haunted him after every battle. "I will rebuild these walls. You may stay, if you'll work with honest tools instead of stolen blades. But there will be laws here. Simple ones. No theft from kin. No blades drawn in anger save to defend the helpless. And roof and supper for every orphan until they can stand straight without fear. Ben Nawal. Mara's eyes flickered to the others. They'll call you soft, other men. She swallowed. Soft men die quick. Then I'd die. He shrugged, yet there was iron beneath the wool of his words. But I'll die right. He looked to Hallie. To start, we need seed grain and scythes. There's a tithe barn at Hayford land still half full, if the rats haven't eaten it. Will you guide me? The girl blinked, startled by being addressed. Her bow hung slack at her side. She nodded once. And we need masons. There were 3 in So's Horn when last I passed. He turned to the half-heard man. Take a wagon and fetch them. Offer coin, but more than that. Offer a future without someone's boot on their throat. What coin? The man snorted. Mine. Sandor reached into his cloak and spilled a purse of silver stags across the table. The clatter echoed like the fall of distant shields. He had earned that silver guarding caravans in the Vale, fighting wildlings beyond the wall, sweating fear and blood on every road that was not home. Now it rolled toward these strangers with a chime of possibility. Their hunger showed in the way their gazes tracked each coin, yet none snatched at them. That restraint pleased him. The first test, he thought, and they have not failed. Night brought a chill that seeped through the cracked mortar, but Sandor refused a place by the hearth. Instead, he circled the outer wall to gauge each breach, stopping where a lantern of tallow set upon a barrel cast just enough light for him to see the names his father had once carved into the stone. Clegane? Below it, a fresher gouge obscured the crest. The mountain's work, no doubt, erasing sentiment as one might scrape mold from cheese. Sandor traced the damaged letters with a thumb rough as sandpaper. His voice rumbled half aloud, half prayer. No more fear. No more. Behind him, quiet footsteps crunched gravel. He did not turn, knowing the tread belonged to Hallie. Children were less adept at stealth than they imagined. When she reached his side, she held out a crust of oat bread wrapped in a square of linen. Your supper, she said. He took it, grateful as for a feast. No poison. She scowled. If I'd wanted you dead, I would have aimed true earlier. A grunt of grudging respect escaped him. He tore the bread in half and handed the larger piece back. She accepted, biting into it with small ferocity. Why come back? She asked through the crumb. To bury ghosts. He considered. And to stand for the living. Plenty stand. She nodded toward the lanterns in the yard where her ragged people bedded down. Few stay standing. Then we'll learn them to stand taller. He chewed. Swallowed. Not by sword alone. By walls mended. Fields tilled. Ben? You speak like a lord already. The words cut deeper than any sneer. I never cared for titles, he said. Only for keeping hounds from turning on their own. She regarded him a long moment. At last she pointed to the gouge marring the crest. What will you do with that? Fill it, he said, surprising himself with the certainty. Stone can be cut again. And the people. Her voice dipped, small and wary. They'll decide whether to carve their names beside mine or leave, but the gates will stay open to every child and widow who needs shelter. He shrugged. Saroth's bandits, Lannister deserters. Blackfire dreamers. Let them mock soft Clegane Keep. We'll answer them with bread, and if that fails, with teeth. Hallie's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not yet trust. She turned away. I'll be ready at first light, she said. To guide you to Hayford grain. He watched her disappear into the stable shadows, then lifted his eyes to the sky. Clouds scudded past a half-mauled moon like wolves chasing prey. Brother Ray, he murmured, you bloody fool. You thought peace could be tended like a garden. We'll see. He pressed the heel of his hand against the crest again, feeling the cold bite. We'll see? Dawn broke crimson. Strangers stamped impatiently while the wagon crew hitched a borrowed mule. Mara counted coins into small linen bags, one for each mason, one for iron nails, one for a cask of salt pork so the children might taste meat come winter. Sandor mounted, armor plates beneath his patched cloak clinking soft as wind chimes. When Hallie swung up behind him, he made no protest. She balanced her bow across her lap like a scepter. The road to Hayford took them through low birch thickets where war had left its carcasses. Shattered helms rusting under fallen leaves, the green-black ribs of half-burned wagons. They passed a toppled sept too, whose bell lay cracked in the nave like a great bronze egg. Each ruin tugged at Sandor's gut, but he pressed on, marking which stones might be hauled back, which timbers might be cut for rafters. Reclamation, he told himself, is a kind of penance. In the afternoon they reached a crossroads tavern doing brisk trade with free riders. Sandor dismounted outside and tied Stranger where a trough of brackish water offered more insects than refreshment. Hallie slid down beside him, wary. Inside, the common room rang with dice clattering against tankards. A minstrel strummed a harp missing 2 strings, singing of the young dragon's conquests for coppers. Sandor's entrance halted conversation like a drawn blade. His height, his face, and the hilt at his shoulder announced danger incarnate. He felt eyes crawl across his burn scars, felt the hush tighten, then slacken, as men decided he was only one, and alone. 2 sellswards near the hearth rose. Their surcoats bore no sigil, but a faint lion's tail of embroidered gold caught the lantern light. Deserters, then, from a disbanded Lannister host. The taller man's beard was matted with grease. The shorter had fingers stained with ink, one of the rare sergeants who could tally plunder. They spread, flanking. Mornin' dog. Greaseegbeard spat. King's gold still spends. Or did you steal those silvers from a corpse too? Sandor's reply was a slow turn of his head, the leather of his collar creaking. Hallie shifted behind him, hand slipping toward her belt knife. No blades, he murmured. The girl froze, puzzled. Sandor faced the sellswords again. I've stolen nothing, but I'll give you a gift. Leave this inn, ride north, and never speak my name again. Inca fingers snorted. Big talk for a burned cur. In a single motion, Sandor unslung his great sword and laid it flat atop the nearest table, rattling cups. The blade's length dwarfed a common longsword. Its edge glittered blue in candle flame. His hands, however, folded one atop the other, empty of violence. I'm done with killing, he said, loud enough to reach the rafters. But the sword isn't. Take it with you if you doubt. He stepped back. The room breathed, collective and uneasy. It was one thing to face a snarling hound, another to face a silent one offering mercy. Greaseegbeard's gaze flicked to the patrons behind him. None would back him. He licked dry lips, spit again, and jerked his head toward the door. Inkshaw fingers followed, cursing under his breath. The tension broke like a cracked beam. Murmur returned to the room. Sandor retrieved his blade and sat. He ordered rye bread and onion soup for himself and Hallie, and over the rim of the wooden trencher watched the crowd recalibrate their opinion. Here sat a monster who would rather share a table than cleave it. Some gave him wide berth. Others, particularly a one-armed potter and a washerwoman with a babe at her hip, inched nearer, curiosity stealing across their fear. The potter spoke first. My lord, he ventured, did I hear you claim Clegane Keep? You heard, Sandor answered. Would you take on tenants? My kiln was smashed on the Gold Road. If I had a roof, I could fire it anew. Then? Sandor dipped bread in soup. Roof comes with walls. Walls need bricks. Can you shape bricks? The potter blinked, then smiled crookedly. Come then, when the moon's new. He tore a chunk of bread. And bring your clay. Word spread faster than plague. By dusk, 3 carpenters, 2 dairymen, and a wet nurse from Maidenpool had pledged to make for Clegane lands after the thaw. Sandor's silver purse grew lighter, yet his burden felt strangely buoyant, as though each coin removed a sliver of Gregor's weight from his shoulders. They camped that night in a hollow crowned by wild plum trees. Hallie dozed beside the embers, Stranger cropping sparse grass beyond. Sandor watched the stars while oiling his sword. For years he had cursed every constellation as though they were eyes of mocking gods. But tonight he found himself tracing unfamiliar patterns. The hammer of the smith, the scales of the father, the lantern of the crone. Peacekeepers, the Septons named them, watchers over the realms of men. He scoffed, yet his scorn lacked force. With a rag he polished the blade until he could almost see his reflection if he angled it away from the firelight. The rippled steel did not show him ugliness. It showed him change, possible and perilous. The next days passed in labor. They fetched the grain, staved off a pair of wolf packs drawn by the butchered fields, and coaxed a dwindling spring from under moss-slick stones to fill the keep's dry cistern. At night, Sandor sat with the ragged folk around a wheel of pale-smoked cheese, teaching the children an old stable chant. "Mend your tack and water free. A faithful hound is liberty." The rhyme struck him foolish, yet the littlest ones, sparrow frail, hair like dandelion fluff, chanted back until their eyelids drooped. One evening, Mara approached with a ledger salvaged from the steward's quarters. The leather cover bore claw marks, but inside, neat columns recorded every tithe paid under old Lord Clegane before Gregor's ascension. Grain ratios, wool counts, harvesty dance donations, to the set. Sandor traced a finger down the ink. His father had been a hard man but not cruel. The proof lay in balanced sums and marginalia noting mercy. 6 sacks forgiven after drought, coins advanced for a widow's roof. "Will you keep the same?" Mara asked. "No." He looked up. "We'll keep better. 2/10 for grain, 1 for the sept, 1 for weather stock. Only after mouths are fed." He closed the ledger. "And no man shall lift a fist against a child. That law is mine and iron." Mara nodded once, eyes glinting like a struck flint. "Words I can follow." Spring bled into early summer. Where briar had choked the courtyard, fresh rows of cabbages unfurled under a crust of mulch. Stray boards became a hen coop. The children painted a new banner on sailcloth. Still a hound, but seated, tail curled, tongue lolling rather than bearing fangs. Sandor endured their laughter as they dabbed green on his boots. He even managed a rumbling laugh of his own. Trouble came, as trouble will, with the first harvest moon. A company of 50 riders bearing striped red cloaks appeared at the outer gate, dust billowing behind them like the tail of a comet. Their captain, one Sir Roderick Thorne of Blackhaven, demanded grain tithe and quarter in the king's name. The king had no such reach these days, but Sir Roderick's sword was long, and his riders restless. Mara barred the gates. Hallie took the wall walk with her bow. Sandor climbed the Merlin steps slow, calm as a smith sizing a blade before the quench. "Sir Roderick," he called down, voice carrying over crackling torches. "I know you. You served Rhaegar once." The captain's brows rose under his helm. "And you are the Hound," he replied. Turncloak twice over. Sandor allowed the insult to hang like ripe fruit. "You seek tithe. All we have we earned. We'll share a meal and free stabling. But no coin." Sir Roderick snorted. "My men are tired of hard bread. We want wine, women, and a purse." His gaze flicked to Hallie, lingering too long. Sandor felt a coal spark in his gut. No wine brewed here. He crossed arms thick with corded muscle. No women unwilling. He leaned forward until his shadow swallowed half the riders below. "But I'll offer a wager. Pass by peacefully, and I'll give each man a loaf. Refuse, and you'll earn nothing but broken bones." Mocking laughter rose from the company, until strangers screamed behind the gate. A raw, murderous bellow that tangled blood and thunder. The stallion's silhouette reared against the torchlit cloth of the new banner. Several horses below stamped, unnerved. Sir Roderick's smile faltered. Sandor spread his arms like a priest. "I'm a peacekeeper now," he said. "But every keeper needs hounds." The standoff stretched. Fireflies drifted between torches. At length, Sir Roderick raised a gloved fist, signaled his men to wheel about. As they rode away, one shouted, "The Blackhaven snake will return." Yet none looked back. Hallie exhaled so hard the arrow on her string quivered. Mara sagged against the gatepost. Sandor descended the steps and laid a steadying hand on each woman's shoulder in turn, silent acknowledgment of their courage. The children clustered by the well, eyes huge. He knelt so they stood above him, and spoke loudly enough for every frightened ear. "That was fear's test," he said. "It chose to ride on, but it will come again. Next time we will greet it the same, with open hands, yet hands that do not tremble." Hallie whispered, "Will they bring more?" "Perhaps." He rose. "Then we must make more bread, and hammer more plowshares, and keep every arrow straight." In the weeks that followed, the keep's blacksmith, a square-jawed woman named Jane, who had once shod tournament chargers at Harrenhal, taught the older boys how to reforge rusted knives into pruning hooks. The potter's kiln smoked day and night, turning out bricks for a new wall buttress. The dairymen cured cheese in cellars freshly swept of bat dung. Sandor worked beside them. Sleeves rolled, sweat darkening old leathers until no man could claim lordly softness. Yet when he spoke, it was rarely in anger. The children learned to bring him water without flinching, and sometimes they dared tug his cloak and ask for tales of King's Landing or of the Quiet Isle. Tales he told slowly, honestly, eyes fixed on horizons they might someday travel. On a clear twilight, as summer's heat waned, Sandor climbed the keep's highest parapet. Soft lamplight glowed in every arrow slit below. Laughter drifted from the yard where Mara's newborn calves bucked on shaky legs. He closed his eyes and felt wind off the trident brush his scarred cheek, cooler than a lover's touch, honest as stone. For the first time, he did not shrink from the memory of flame. Instead, he saw it as a forge that had melted him down and cast him anew. The mountain's weight was still there, but like an anvil, necessary, immovable, the thing against which better tools are shaped. Behind him, Hallie's voice rose. "What shall we call the first feast, my lord?" He turned. In her hands she held a wreath of river willow bound with dogros. She meant to crown him, perhaps. The thought sparked panic, then a strange calm. He knelt, but did not bow. "Call it first mending," he said. She placed the wreath upon his head. Leaves rustled. Somewhere below, a bell tolled, not cracked, but whole. Its note carried out across the fields to where tenant fires flickered like hopeful stars, and farther still to roads he had not yet walked. Lord of Clegane, burned yet unbroken, breathed deep and let the sound settle in his chest like a second heartbeat. The peace would not last forever. Winter would return, and with it wolves, men, and memories. But as the evening swelled with song, the rasp of a whetstone dragging across shovel blades, the childish shout of victory at knucklebones, the quiet hush of Mara's lullaby, he sensed a truth strong enough to outlast bone. One scar may wound. Many, woven together, become armor. And so, the Hound kept watch. Lord of Clegane Keep by choice rather than accident of blood. Keeper of a fragile peace, born not of softness, but of scars made sacred in the work of mending. With each breath he took, the walls around him seemed less like tombstones of an old cruelty, and more like the foundation of something fierce and desperately alive. A place where even a burned man might lay down his sword, if only long enough to teach others how to wield it in defense, and no longer in rage. He let the night settle, every star a silent vow above the reborn keep, and whispered into the dark, "Stay. Stand. Mend." The stones seemed to answer, holding their warmth long after the sun slipped beneath the trees, as if the land itself had chosen to believe him. Okay. The first feast of first mending began with silence, so thick a dropped spoon rang like chapel bells. Mara had ceded the high seat to Sandor, yet he took the bench just below the dais, leaving the carved oak chair empty as a promise. No one would rule from a height until the keep itself stood tall again. The hall smelled of newly scrubbed stone and herb smoke from bay leaves thrown onto the hearth. An old Hayford custom Hallie insisted upon to call the good spirits of bread. Children craned their necks to watch the rising swirl of scent. Elders rubbed palms together as if warming them over a hearth of memory too long gone cold. The tables were makeshift trestles playing from fallen beech, warped in places, yet they bore platters both humble and miraculous. Loaves browned with ash-laced crusts, river fish wrapped in nettle, the season's first cabbages, stewed with a single ham hock, Jean had bartered from a passing swineherd. For the little ones, a pot of honeyed milk steamed beside whey cheese curds rolled in nut crumbs. Small eyes widened at the luxury. Milk was scarce since the mountain's outriders had slaughtered every heifer for sport. Sandor watched as an orphan lad named Little Ben, because a single winter had robbed him of enough height to fit his years, dipped a finger into the foam, tasted, and gasped as if it swallowed starlight. No musicians strutted the aisle, but one girl beat a frame drum made of barrel hoop and stretched hide. Her rhythm faltered whenever she caught Sandor's gaze, so he looked away, letting the beat steady like a cartwheel over flat road. When the meal was nearly consumed, Mara rose at the fire's lip, her breath a silver gust. "This feast," she declared, "we set not for our bellies, but for our hearts. We set it upon the memory of all taken by fire and sword, and on the hope that no more will follow them." She lifted a chipped cup of small beer. "To the mending." "To the mending," echoed every throat, though some cracked on unshed tears. Sandor had no gift for speeches, but something in him demanded answer. He stood, chair scraping like stone on stone, and most diners flinched. He hated to see it, yet understood. Old fears do not scatter with one wave of bread-scented air. He found Hala's wary eyes near the hearth, Mara's calm ones behind the stew cauldron. Stranger's inky stare through the open door to the yard. With those anchors he spoke, voice lower than thunder yet carrying like river current through reeds. "We mend with more than hammers and mortar," he said. "We mend with truth. So, truth first. In this hall sits a man who once hacked flesh for sport, who obeyed kings who fed on fear. That man still lives in me. I cannot cut him out, nor do I pretend he's gone. But I can chain him. And chains grow strong when held by many hands." He opened his scarred palms. "I offer mine. Hold fast if you dare." Quiet rippled, hesitant. Then Little Ben, still licking honeyed milk from his lip, slipped down from the bench, crossed the rush-strewn floor, and pressed his grubby fingers against Sandor's. The hall seemed to exhale. A widowed seamstress followed, calloused hands trembling. Next came Jean, the smith, with a grip like iron tongs. Soon a dozen more linked, a chain of flesh and will that bound no man but bound all to a common vow. Sandor felt the weight of their trust greater than any sword he had ever lifted. That night, he dreamed. Not of flame, nor of his brother's laughter echoing in burning stables, but of a quiet riverbank where pups tumbled among reeds. He bent to touch one, felt soft fur under his ruined hand, and woke weeping without shame. Summer ripened. Fields of barley swayed like copper seas, and the children learned to frighten crows with clappers carved from split pine. Sandor rode patrol at dawn and dusk, strangers' hooves leaving prints in the dust that lesser horses seemed to avoid. He found pride sprouting in unexpected furrows. When a thatcher's apprentice presented the keep with the first bundles of water reed from freshly reclaimed pools. When Mara's newborn twins, one nursing, the other bawling with a vigor that promised survival, were christened beneath the half-rebuilt sept arch. When Jane shaped a new gate hinge so smooth it sang like a bell when tested. Yet peace is a crop that draws thieves. Word of a lord who armed himself with mercy traveled the byways quicker than ravens. Dispossessed tenants trudged in with what little they could carry. A widow with 3 children and a broken churn, a one-eyed sellsword who offered his spear in exchange for seed potatoes, a silent septa whose torn robes told of bandits less gentle than hunger. Sandor welcomed them, though each arrival stretched grain stores thinner. He learned the math of parsimony. 2 ladles of porridge feed 5 if you add nettle seeds. A pig's trotters can season stew for 30 if boiled long enough. The children laughed at the bitterness of acorn bread dipped in onion broth. But they ate, and no one died of cold or scurvy. In late harvest, Sir Roderick returned, this time with 70 riders and a black and orange banner that once belonged to House Moradin. Rain sheeted across the valley, streaking helm cheeks and soaking bowstrings. From the battlements, Sandor watched their torches sputter like dying wasps. He wondered if Brother Ray would have barred the gates or offered shelter. But Brother Ray's flock had been butchered by hard men who used kindness as a whetstone for cruelty. Sandor weighed memory against duty and chose a third blade, caution. He met Sir Roderick at the sally port. Two raw-boned lads hauled the iron rebar aside, and Sandor stepped into the sluicing dark without helm or cloak. Rain plastered his hair to the ruined half of his face, revealing every welt and seam. The sellswards recoiled. Even Sir Roderick's horse snorted and danced sideways. "We've no quarrel with you, Clegane," Roderick called above the downpour, though his eyes tracked the ashy hollow of Sandor's cheek. "But we require refuge until the storms pass. And provisions. We pay." "Them?" Sandor glanced at the coin pouch Roderick jangled. Gold glinted, but memory of the children's thin wrists weighed heavier. "Winter stores lie thin already," he said. "Then thin them further." Roderick nudged his horse a step nearer. "We carry the king's seal. Refusal is treason." "The king's seal melted with his throne," Sandor replied. "And what truth sits that throne today bows more to coin and crown." He held Roderick's gaze. "But I won't turn away hungry men. You'll stable your horses outside the curtain wall. Inside, you sleep unarmed and eat what we set." "Mendamawendo." Murmurs rippled through the riders. They did not relish disarmament. Roderick's gloved fist tightened on his reins. "Your walls won't withstand 70 blades should we choose otherwise." Sandor shrugged, a gesture like granite shifting. "Test them." He stepped forward until rain pattered on Roderick's breastplate. "The first blade raised in anger ends you. Maybe ends me too. But then 70 men bleed in mud, and leave nothing but carrion crows to inherit grain they cannot stomach." Thunder rolled, distant yet profound as judgment. Roderick's shoulders sank, fraction by fraction. At last he spat into the mud. "Very well, we yield our steel." That night, 70 swords, daggers, and mace heads clanged into the cart outside the gatehouse. The children, wide-eyed, stacked them under Jean's watchful glare. Inside the hall, sellswards shared benches with tenant farmers. Hunger leveled them more effectively than any decree. Mara ladled barley gruel. Hallie poured watered ale, and Sandor kept watch at the central pillar. Arms crossed, the very shape of unblinking law. On the second evening, a brawl sparked when a sellsword laughed too loudly at a stuttered joke. A fist flew, then another. Sandor waded through bodies like a bear through reeds, seized each man by the scruff, knocked skulls with a dull thud that echoed hush across the beams. He dragged them outside, thrust their faces under the cistern spout, until shock quenched fury, then ordered them to repair the chicken coop they had splintered. Splinters bled worse than noses, and the lesson held. By the third night, songs replaced brawls, rough voices rumbling a Dornish marching ditty, while Hala's drum kept time. When the rain eased, Roderick sought Sandor atop the wall. Torches guttered, but moonlight sketched their shadows. A long one, and a taller, both scarred by war. "You fight softer than rumor claimed," Roderick observed. "Soft enough to let strong men live," Sandor said. Roderick toyed with a damp feather from his helm crest. "My company could use a lord with lands. You'd keep your keep, we'd keep it safe. A contract." "Now." "I have walls," Sandor answered, "and men enough to mend them. Go where steel's needed, but leave the children grain." Roderick managed half a smile. "Peacekeeper indeed." He extended a gauntleted hand. Sandor clasped it, leather squeaking. "You're an odd hound," Roderick murmured. "Hounds bite." "Hounds guard," Sandor corrected. "If you see Gregor's shadow over these stones again, remember which brother stands here now." Roderick rode out at dawn, leaving 10 casks of salt beef and a bolt of Dornish wool in fair trade. As the last hoofbeats faded, Sandor felt something new settle inside him. Respect earned not by fear, but by firm mercy. It tasted foreign as Myrish wine. Autumn's chill sharpened tools and tempers alike. Bands of king's men, queen's men, and pretenders' men skirmished along the gold road, driving refugees east. Clegane lands swelled beyond their means. Granaries creaked under weight, that had no right to exist after such thin harvests. Sandor ordered ration days. Half porridge at midday for every plate. Children first. Mara fretted. Jane hammered spearheads from plow-grubbed iron, muttering that peace is only a lull in killing. Sandor listened, nodded, and still kept the gates unbarred. One crisp morning, a raven alighted on the kennel roof. Sleek black, eyes like polished jet. Hallie, now nearly a woman, coaxed it down with crumbs. A wax tube on its leg bore a sigil, a mailed fist around a scroll. Inside, a parchment writ in fine copperplate. Lord Clegane. The realm sups on ashes. Its pups cry for milk. Come to Lord Harroway's town at the turn of the moon. Voice your claim to bread over blade. Signed, Sir Davos of the Fingers. Hand to King Stannis, though crowns matter little now. Sandor read twice before the words steadied. He had never met Davos Seaworth, but tales told of a smuggler turned lord who prized honesty above lineage and bore the proof in shortened fingers. A summit of peacekeepers. Did such madness bloom beyond these walls as well? Mara argued against departure. The keep needs its hound. Leave and wolves will test the flock. Jane offered to ride in his stead, but no one would heed a smith without title. Even Hallie flinched at the thought of strangers eyeing her home unguarded. I must go, Sandor said. Peace cannot kennel itself here alone. He traced the map Hallie had inked on stretched calfskin. Clegane lands, the Trident, Lord Harroway's, mist-choked ford. It's 2 days' hard ride if roads hold. 4, if they break. Mara packed oatcakes and dried apples. Jane fitted Sandor's hauberk anew, removing broken rings, adding lighter steel at the shoulder where old burns made leather chafe. The children stuffed talismans in his saddlebag. Carved twigs, river stones, a hen's feather, for soft landings, as little Ben explained. Sandor accepted them with a gruff nod that hid a swell like floodwater behind his ribs. He left before dawn shivered the sky. Hallie rode beside him a mile, silent beyond the clop of hoof on frost-hardened earth. At the fork where willow branches formed a crude arch, she halted, bow across pommel. Bring back truth of the world, she said. May be uglier than you hope. Bring it anyway. We can mend ugly. Damn. He watched her until distance blurred the green of her cloak, then spurred stranger north. The road to Harroway's town cut through country, still speckled with Gore's memories. Charred siege towers, corpses long gnawed to bone, a tumble of once white cloaks shredded by weather until they resembled molted snakeskin. Sandor felt each corpse as a phantom tug. A life that might have found hearth in his hall had fate bent different. He whispered their unmarked names into the wind, a litany of accountability. At dusk of the second day, torches dotted the horizon like embers on a black forge. He crested a low rise and beheld the ford. Ruined ferries jammed as makeshift barricades, tents sewn from rag ends, banners of every hue drooping in rain's memory. He counted at least 7 lords by heraldry, twice that in hedge knights, and thrice again in smallfolk. They gathered around 3 sigil poles driven into the mud. Stannis crowned stag in fiery heart. Lady Barbary Dustin's flayed man inverted in defiance of Bolton's, no longer feared. And, to Sandor's astonishment, a hound seated, tail curled, painted on sailcloth. A murmur swelled as he dismounted. Some stepped back, eyeing his scars. Others drifted close, hands brushing hilts. He ignored them, seeking the man who matched rumor. Low-born, weather-creased, missing finger bones. He found Davos beside a cook fire, cradling a bowl of barley stew. Sir Davos, Sandor said. The Onion Knight eyed him a breath, stood, and offered the bowl. Share warmth, my lord. Sandor accepted, sipped. Sweet with carrot, and a hint of fish. Good. He wiped his mouth. You summoned? I asked. Davos motioned to the milling camp. These came of their own will. Some for parley, some for plunder, yet all stay because violence grows stale. Winter looms. Men tire of digging graves they may soon occupy. No. Words won't fill bellies. Sandor scanned faces. A maester with quills tucked behind each ear. A Dothraki rider holding reins of a half-starved mare. A mother nursing twin babes too young to know banners. What summit do you propose? A league, Davos said. Voice soft but sure. Not of crowns, of keeps. Hearts in common cause. Feed the small folk. Punish rapers. Hold roads clear for seed and cloth. He studied Sandor's burned scars. Not unkindly. Your holdfast is proof peace breeds respect. Sandor barked a laugh like iron struck wrong. Peace breeds hunger. Respect is paid in coin or blood. Sometimes both. Davos smiled, weary. But better spent together than stolen. He gestured to a tent where lords argued over parchment. Help me sway them. You carry the weight of fear. Let them see how you wield it without drawing a blade. Sandor followed. Stew-warming hands grown stiff around sword grips too many winters. Inside the tent, torches hissed. Sir Imry Florent denounced Lady Dustin for hoarding grain. Sir Talbot Seri accused the Crab brothers of press-ganging orphans. A septon in cracked crystal crown wept scripture none heeded. The room smelled of rancid sweat and desperation. Sandor let them rant until voices frayed. Then he stepped between, slammed his gauntlet on the map table. The sound cracked like a whip. Enough. You trade blame like whores trade pox. He leaned forward, firelight carving a demon mask across his ruined cheek. We have one realm now. Hunger. Its borders are every empty belly. Pay its tax. Grain, shelter, roads safe. Or it will claim your halls as easily as it claimed the homeless. Bendawan. Silence pooled. Thick. Eyes darted, tallying reactions like dice odds. Lady Dustin's thin smile curled first. A Clegane preaching charity, she mused. Did the mountain's ghost turn sweet? No, Sandor said. It rots. I shovel dirt over it each dawn. Join me or choke on its stench. Davos stepped forward. Let the Hound speak truth. Winter berries rich and poor alike. A league of keeps might yet bank the coals through frost. He unfurled a parchment. Oaths of mutual supply lines, rotating patrols, communal granaries. Sign, and bind yourselves to share. Sir Imry scoffed. Share with flayed man and crab? I'd sooner salt my fields. Sandor turned his gaze on the lordling, measured him like a sow too thin to slaughter. Fields salted feed no one, nor do mouths silenced. He drew a dagger, a dull eating knife, and sliced his palm. Blood beaded, bright as garnet. He pressed the blade into Davos' hand. Quill's ink fades. Write with this. Gasps fluttered. Davos did not flinch. He dipped the dagger's point in Sandor's blood and scrawled his name across the oath. Red gleamed wetly. He handed knife to Lady Dustin. She hesitated, then slit her thumb, bowed, and signed. One by one the lords followed, blood mingling crimson script. The septon signed last, tears washing grime from his cheeks. When the parchment dried, Davos rolled it. This league holds if each keep pledges a peacekeeper to oversee fair tithe. Clegane, will you serve first term? Sandor imagined leaving his folk for half a year, returning to find wolves or worse inside the walls. But the league would falter if none stepped forward. He nodded once. My steward stands ready. I ride at dawn. He returned to Clegane Keep with dusk at his heels and news heavy as chainmail. The courtyard glowed with harvest torches. Carts creaked under barley sheaves bundled golden as king's ransom. Tenants greeted him with cheers muffled by worry. Absence had stretched days longer than promised. Mara strode from the hall, babe on hip, jaw set in a line that brooked no argument. You leave again, she said without greeting. To guard roads. He dismounted stiffly. 6 moons. League needs witness more than swords. Then so. The keep needs you more. She touched stranger's foam-flecked neck, as if soothing herself. You asked us to chain the old hound. Don't loose him now chasing bigger bones. Sandor removed his helm, hair plastered flat. League bones are our bones. If neighbors starve, they'll raid. Better share freely than yield under torch. Mara frowned. We stood once under torch. You and I. I remember screams in the stables. She placed her free hand against his scarred cheek. He stiffened, but did not pull away. You think to kill that memory with charity? It's a stubborn weed. And I know. Then we prune daily. He covered her hand with his broad one. Hold the keep. Hallie will captain archers. Jane patrol walls. Little Ben counts stores. He's quick with sums now. And if war rides through the gate, hang League's banner high. Under it, every lord swore to defend peacekeepers' hearths. He managed a crooked grin. Hear me preaching banners like a maester. You preach hope. That's heavier. She sighed, shifted the babe. I'll mend the weight until you return. He kissed the child's brow, a tentative brush of cracked lips that startled him more than delight, and sought Hallie atop the watchtower. She met him halfway, bow across back, moonlight silvering the down on her cheeks. Pack light, he told her. You ride too. Her eyes flared. Peacekeeper's squire? Peacekeeper's witness. He rested a hand on her shoulder. When League lords ask what peace costs, they'll see your scars. Indeed, the past months had etched new ones. A thin line across her forearm from scythe training, a faded bruise where ladder rungs had splintered. Show them strength wears no gilding. She straightened. I'll sharpen my arrows. Sharpen mercy first. He started to turn away, paused. In Lord Haraway's camp, I saw boys younger than you bearing pikes. If war calls children, peace must answer with iron lungs. I've iron enough, she said, voice steady as plow handles in spring clay. At dawn, they rode. A dozen volunteers accompanied. Jane, who refused to let her freshly forged spears travel without her hammer. Little Ben perched beside her on a cargo mule, 2 dairymen eager to barter cheese for northern oats, and a trio of sellswords out of Roderick's company, who claimed allegiance to the League's dream. Mara stood upon the gatehouse, babe cradled, watching until the column bent behind a copse of elder. Sandor did not look back. He bore the faces of each stone and each child within him, stitched into a cloak memory could not tear. The League's work proved labyrinthine. First they escorted a convoy of grain south to Duskendale, where dockworkers rioted over quarter rations. Sandor quelled the melee without drawing steel. He walked straight into the thicket of clubs, seized the biggest man by beard and belt, and hoisted him into a cart of wheat. Laughter erupted. Riot dissolved into sorting sacks. Next, they mediated a dispute between 2 river lords over mill water rights. Sandor listened, pondered, then suggested building a 3rd sluice to feed both mills. Labor shared, profit shared, grudges drowned. Surprisingly, the lords agreed, perhaps because they feared the Hound's teeth more than each other's swords. Winter's first snows dusted the King's Road by the time word reached them of raiders, wearing cracked Lannister helms, pillaging lesser holds. Captain Byam, a barrel-shaped man who smelled of boiled onions, urged immediate charge. Sandor counseled patience. Find their hunger, he said. Feed it, and you hunt fewer ghosts later. They rode north instead, tracked raiders to a camp amid black pine. Hallie crept close enough to count their numbers. 22 gaunt, clutching makeshift torches around a single slaughtered pig. With dawn's gray light cutting through frost haze, Sandor and Byam approached alone, helms off, swords sheathed. The raiders scrambled for axes. One aimed a crossbow at Sandor's chest. No quarrel. Sandor called. We bring bread for oath. What oath? Croaked a raider whose beard trailed like moss. Hold your steel. Sandor replied, and League kitchens feed you until spring. He gestured to wagons hidden beyond the ridge. In return you fell trees, split rails, mend bridges. What if we'd rather steal? Asked another, younger, eyes sunken. Then you'll fight me. Sandor drew his greatsword, but reversed it. offering hilt first. Win, take wagons. Lose. Confusion rippled like wind through pine. Finally, the young man stepped forward, snatched the sword, staggered under its weight, clearly too weak to wield it. Sandor removed his cloak, baring arms knotted thick, and stood weaponless. The youth swung. Sandor ducked, seized his wrist, twisted until steel clanged onto ice. He released, but the youth slumped, exhausted more by hunger than defeat. Sandor retrieved the sword, planted it point down. Choose, bread or blood. They chose bread. By sundown, 22 ex-raiders marched behind the convoy, axes shouldered, singing a Lannisport shanty about a drunken goat. Hallie kept cadence on her drum, and even Byam's onions failed to sour the music. So the months rolled. Escort, parley, mend, escort again. Sandor measured success not in victories, but in stretches of road where travelers lit campfires unafraid, in villages where children's ribs no longer counted like abacus beads. The League's blood-written oath hung in every hall they passed, the inked names fading, but the dried crimson still vivid. Yet winter presses even the stoutest beam. A blizzard buried the trident crossings under drifts high as rooftops. Grain stores spoiled in Riverland's granaries when damp crept through cracked tiles. Rumor reached League ears. Clegane Keep starved. Worse, bandits in flayed cloaks prowled its boundary, claiming Lady Dustin's authority though she denied them. Sandor's heart seized. He pictured Hal's drums silent, Stranger's stall empty, Mara's babe crying without milk. He set out with Davos and a column of 30, hauling sledges laden with oats and lamp oil. Snow choked the forest roads. Horses floundered, men pushed on foot. At dusk of the fourth day, orange glare flickered ahead, the keep's courtyard ablaze. Shouts cut through wind. Silhouettes clashed like ink on parchment. Sandor spurred Stranger, thundered through drifts, League men straggling behind. Inside the outer gate, broken spears littered, churned snow. 3 bodies lay face down, cloaks flayed pink in torchlight. League colors fluttered above, intact. Mara charged from the hall, blood streaking her brow, dagger in hand. Relief flooded her face on seeing Sandor. Then fury. You're late. He swung down. Little Ben? Hurt, but lives. She pointed to the kennel where children huddled. Bandits demanded grain. We gave steel. Now. Sandor stalked the yard until he found Jane binding Hallie's arm. A deep gash, but clean. Ben lay beside, leg splinted. Sandor knelt, voice low. You held. Hallie managed a grin. Bandits forgot dogs bite. Where's their chief? Dead. Mara's dagger in his throat. She winced as Jean drew knots tight. They lit the straw hoping to flush us. Your new gate hinge held. Pride and sorrow twined a helix inside Sandor. He rose and addressed the gathered folk, League men and keep dwellers alike. We mend still, he said. Tonight, mend wounds. Tomorrow we mend trust. Dustin will answer for cloaks stolen in her name. But hear this. He lifted a torch. This keep stands because you stood. Walls are stone. Hearts are stone fired. No flame breaks them. Snow hissed in the torch, steam wafting upward like incense. He planted it and began hauling oats to the granary. Davos joined, hands red with cold. Behind them, men and women formed a chain. Sacks passed hand to hand, flame-lit faces grim yet resolute. High above, the seated Hound banner snapped, edges singed but unburned. Spring blossoms taste sweeter when death's breath lingers still. By the following thaw, the League counted 9 keeps in its pact. Roads patrolled by rotating guards, granaries pooled, grain loaned and repaid with interest, measured not in coin but in future seed. Clegane Keep hosted the first assembly of renewal. Lords and small folk alike sat side by side on benches built from the very timbers salvaged after the blizzard fire. Sandor opened the moot with neither crown nor sword in sight. He carried a smith's hammer, Jane's gift, and laid it upon the dais. This mends, he said, or it destroys. We choose. He looked to Hallie, now tall as Mara's shoulder, then to little Ben who read the grain tallies aloud with clear voice. He looked last to stranger, grazing beyond the window. Content. In their faces, he saw roads still to walk, winters still to test. But he also saw scars woven into armor, stronger than any forge might yield alone. The moot debated fancy laws, trade tariffs, river levies, marriage contracts, but every proposal bent eventually toward the same spine. Guard the helpless, feed the hungry, punish cruelty. When last parchment was sealed, Davos raised the blood-inked oath anew, now edged with fresh signatures drawn in simple ink. No need for bleeding, some joked. The wound is known. Night deepened. Torches guttered low. Sandor slipped outside, climbed the parapet where wind carried the scent of thawing earth. His gaze swept fields dotted with lanterns, tenant fires burning past curfew in celebration. He thought of his brother's laugh one final time. Let it drift into the dark, unanchored. In its absence, he heard new sounds. Children's drums echoing across newly planted barley, hammers striking rhythm on iron, distant bells of traveling septons who dared the road now without guards. Mara joined him, cloak wrapped around sleeping babe, now toddling, plump with hope. She leaned against the merlin, silent. Below, Jane taught a bandit-turned-mason how to set keystones without cracking mortar. Hallie traded archery tips with a lad from Blackhaven. Ben counted stars flaring across the re-blacked dome. What shall we call this season? Mara asked quietly. Sandor considered. Second mending. Second implies end. She touched the stone, warm from day's sun. Mending never ends. He nodded, breathing the cool air deep, savoring how it no longer burned lungs accustomed to smoke. We'll call it now then. Now is where wounds heal. She smiled. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, we hammer again. They stood until moon crowned the keep in silver, until stranger birds, migrants from southlands unravaged by war, circled above, unsure whether to nest in freshly pruned orchard boughs. Sandor raised his scarred hand, palm open, and the breeze slipped through his fingers like water yet left them wet with dew. He closed them around nothing and felt them full. In the courtyard, Hal's drumbeat slowed, softened. Voices hummed a lullaby forged from many tongues. The Stormlander croon, the Val's clear yodel, the Northman's low chant, the Riverlander's rolling cadence. A peacekeeper's anthem with no need of words. Sandor followed the tune until heartbeats matched, until the night seemed less a blanket over burdens than a quilt sewn from their surviving. When at last he descended the wall, he paused at the archway leading into the hall. Above it, Davos had hung a new plank carved by Jeannie's careful hand. Let no child fear these stones. Sandor traced the letters. Splinters pricked his scarred fingertips, drawing pinpoints of blood. He let them bead, did not wipe them away. Some oaths, after all, are worth rewriting in crimson, again and again, until time itself remembers. He stepped inside. The doors closed behind him, not as prison gates, but as arms gathering hearth heat. The hall smelled of stew, barley, and a future marinated in stubborn resolve. He breathed it in, deeper than any flame-scorched lung had right to hold, and exhaled a single word into the knot of voices. Home. And the walls, whether by echo or miracle, whispered it back.